Hi everyone, my name is Dana. I'm a researcher at Alma Center, and I would like to just sort of connect to the previous panel. And following what Sarit has said, I grew up here in the Upper Galilee, in the Western Galilee, excuse me, in a community that has now been evacuated and has become a military zone and has actually been hit several times by Hezbollah strikes. So everything is very important. This is a very important voice that I want to voice. And I am in charge of all the data research in Alma, and my role includes collecting, processing, and analyzing data on attacks against Israel, identifying trends, and drawing the relevant insights and conclusions. And let's talk a little bit about figures and numbers. We're a bit short on time, but over the last month, 37 Israelis have been hurt, whether it's civilians or soldiers, as part of Hezbollah attacks on the northern border. Of them, 4 were killed, 1 civilian and 3 soldiers, and 34 were wounded. And in this diagram, you can see all the attacks on the northern border since October 8th and until the end of April. These are attacks by Hezbollah and other organizations that attack Israel's northern area, and we can see that the intensity remains on an average of about 250 strikes per month, which is 50 to 60 strikes per week, half of which are against civilian infrastructure. All in all, a total of 1,637 attacks in 7 months of fighting. In this diagram, you can see the trends, Hezbollah's use of the various types of weapons. The data is based on on a number of incidents and not the number of projectiles launched in each event. So if in one incident 30 projectiles or 30 rockets were launched, it's still considered one incident. And you can see that until 2024, January 2024 that is, there was increased use of anti-tank missiles, but then we see the decline between December and January, and then since January 2024, there has been a decline in anti-tank shooting, and at the same time we see an increase in high trajectory. So even though the number of anti-tank incidents has gone down, we still see that Hezbollah has maintaining significant capacity for shootings, a 60 incident average a month. And we see that Hezbollah is maintaining its preparedness and readiness in 3 arrays: the rocket, the UAVs, and the anti-tank missiles. And so the relative reduction, or the relative decline in the use of anti-tank missiles should be looked at alongside the rise in the use of UAVs, which is another lethal means of high precision. And this trend has been on the rise over the last 3 months. So we can see that in February there were 7 UAV incidents, in March there were 24, and in April there were 42 UAV incidents, which include events that Hezbollah has taken responsibility over, but also UAVs that have been intercepted and Hezbollah did not take responsibility for. And of course, some of these UAVs are not attack UAVs, they are reconnaissance UAVs. But another thing that we need to speak about when we talk about the increase in the use of UAVs is that over these months, responsibility has also been increasingly taken by Hezbollah, as we saw in Metula and yesterday in Nakia. So this is just a bit of data from us, and I'm very excited to begin this panel. And I'd like to invite Major General in Reserves Gershon HaKohen, who will speak about Hezbollah's rationale as an arm of Iran. Gershon served in various capacities in the IDF, including the commander of the Gash Formation, the commander of the military colleges, the commander of the Northern Corps, and the Division Commander's Course and 446 Corps. He was also a researcher at the Begin Sadat Strategic Research Center, and he also lives up north. So the floor is yours, Gershon. So first of all, aside from saying thank you for inviting me, well done and congratulations on this conference, it symbolizes the tremendous importance that if things don't come from the states, organized agencies, because the systems of the government are structurally blind, not because they do so maliciously, but it is just a kind of institutional blindness that they suffer from. And Sarit can tell you a thing or two about what she's seen and that others haven't seen because they just didn't want to see. I want to focus on one simple question, a question that we can explain to a young child. But why? Why is Hezbollah fighting us? And our friends, quote unquote, in Jabalia, Beit Hanun, in Gaza, we can say about those, Chak el Auda. Poor people, what can we do? They're miserable, they're refugees, they're dreaming of going back to the places where they have been sent away from in 1948 during the Nakba. They have a key around their necks, they each have their own stories. But what is Nasrallah's story? What is Naim Qasim's story? What is Ali Kachi, the commander of the southern front of Hezbollah? What is his story? They're not refugees. They were not here before. What are they fighting for? And I think that this is a very important question that Iran should also be asked, because they declared war against Israel. But not just that, they have a vision to annihilate Israel, and we haven't declared war against Iran, so it's asymmetrical. Why? And I don't think there's really an answer to this question, not unless we go to faith and religion. And it is very difficult for Westerners, for people in the West, because since the beginning of Christianity in the West, there has been a difference between nationality and religion, between the practical life, between the daily business and faith. But it's not so in Islam, and it's not so in the Bible, but we have come a long way since the Bible. So if we were to ask ourselves, what is so hard? Why is Hezbollah? Hezbollah is operated as a strategy of believers. And the word faith is not something we understand well either, because the best way to explain what faith looks like, what belief looks like, from the Hezbollah perspective and the jihadi perspective, and all those who fight us, is mujahideen, because of Abdallah Hazan and the great revolution that he led. But they are actually led, and they are driven by jihad. It means that the only way to explain it is that the dollar says, in God we trust. And if it had said, in God we believe, the Lubavitcher rabbi would not have given dollars out, because trust is life. Believe is theological. In Islam, there's no theology. God is in the practical reasoning. It's in the big questions of life, in the faith to follow a road that seems impossible. Faith that the believer can make the impossible possible. It is like the Chalutzim's Zionism, the pioneers' Zionism. So what does it mean in a nutshell? In a nutshell, it is faith being manifest in the practicality. El Mukawama. Accidentally or mistakenly, the West translated it as resistance, but it's not. In the French resistance, when the war ends and the Germans leave, the French go back to their normal lives. El Mukawama is not resistance. It is something that begins with a cosmic world view that sees stability as an illusion, that has an envelope that is an interest of the bourgeois Western society to maintain reality and its stability, to mark the inability of those who disagree with this reality to go ahead and change it. And the Mukawama says first and foremost that the reality that seems stable is just like the calm waves of the sea. Today the sea may be calm, but tomorrow is a new day. And that's why every morning they ask, Shul Akhbar, what's new? Because the Muslim and also the serious Jewish outlook that goes to our sources is a new day, and because God brings out the sun every day, and it is existential to be in a fight, not to be stable. And in the West, stability is the way things are, and everything that is not stable is a diversion from the day-to-day, and that's exactly the opposite. And if stability is something that needs to be broken, then you always have to struggle. How do you change reality? There's the vision of jihad, and the Mukawama person is devoted to that. The jihad strategy and the Mukawama strategy is, in this sense, synchronizing constant tension. On the one hand, never to stop fighting and struggling. You must never stop the struggle. But on the other hand, you have to be very realistic, very pragmatic. They're not deluded, they're not messianic, they're not disconnected from reality. On the contrary, God is in the details, God is in the reality. We must not crash ourselves against a fence or a wall. We must find cracks and use these cracks. And Allah Karim. And what does it mean? A constant struggle as a fundamental way of life. It is the opposite of Clausewitz. Clausewitz, of course, is German. He's a Westerner. He's from Western Europe, 19th century. And he explains you don't need to read his writings in order to know that war is the continued policy in different ways, in different means. Clausewitz allows me to explain what al-Mukawama is and what jihad is and what mujahideen is. It means the exact opposite. It means that war, instead of war being an extension of policy in different means, it means that the policy is the extension of war in different means. It means that when war reaches a kind of dead end, because the circumstances are not optimal, or if there's marhalat listadraf, which means a stage of weakness, if it's not my day, tomorrow's a better day, a different day. It is just like Khomeini's poisonous cup speech, where he accepts the surrender, a kind of surrender at the end of the Iran-Iraq war. He faces parliament and he says, this is the will of God, this is reality, and tomorrow is a new day. And we should ask today, where's Iran and where's Iraq? And in this respect, the Hudna too is not just one step on the road to peace, but on the contrary, it's a timeout in war, waiting for another opportunity, better circumstances, and constantly preparing for what has now become an obstacle. To understand the practicality of it, we have to look at a research done by the History Department, Ohad Naslo, about 1995 to 2000, the last 5 years of the security build. We didn't understand a thing. We thought that we were stopping Hezbollah from reaching Ma'alot school, as happened in 74, but that's not what happened. We thought Hezbollah sought to free the Lebanese soil, but that was just an excuse. All that Hezbollah wanted is to use this excuse that legitimizes it internationally to liberate Lebanese soil, and by that way to humiliate the IDF, which is the main purpose, to humiliate Israel and to make us irrelevant compared to our military force, and to make us leave in a way that we are actually abandoning our allies, the southern Lebanese army, because we are traitors. If there was a wall that is strong, who relies on a feeble wall? No one wants to lean on a feeble wall. You go to another stronger wall, and that's what they've managed to do. And what happens the day after we leave Lebanon in 2000? We thought they would put down their arms because they finished their assignment as the French resistance. But no, that was just an excuse. The Shaba farms were just an excuse. We're fighting the Shaba farms in order to reach Jerusalem. The Shaba farms are the gate to Jerusalem. The same is true for the naval border, the same with the 1713 points of disagreement, because it's not going to end there. It's just an excuse. And I will soon wrap up. I just want to present this very simply. They are fighting for an Islamic redemption vision. And as Nasrallah said in the last Friday of Ramadan, the Al-Quds Day, Nasrallah said, I believe that in my lifetime I will pray in Al-Aqsa. So it's not the 13 points that they care about. It's not the Shaba farms. It's all an excuse. Their point of departure is a supreme religious reason, and because of the 13 points and the villages and the Shaba farms, they just want an excuse to fight Israel in order to make the impossible possible and destroy Israel. That is their purpose. That is what they're fighting for.
Thank you, Gershon. The next one to speak is Tal Be'ari, Head of Research at Alma Center. He will focus on the current threat by Hezbollah against Israel. after the months of war. According to the Minister of Defense, one half of the Hezbollah commanders were killed, leaving the territory for IDF operations. Is this so? Tal, please. So, good afternoon now. First of all, I'd like to connect to what Gershon said about Hezbollah and faith. If you didn't step in the fence tunnel beginning in Ramla and going all the way to Zerit, that is 80 meters deep, maybe doesn't understand the connection between faith and Hezbollah. If you go there, you understand what Gershon was talking about. So as Dana said earlier, and she gave you some statistics, unfortunately the statistics over the past 7 months doesn't exactly show that the IDF is harming the key arrays of Hezbollah in terms of capabilities and fitness. I will talk about the tactical level. I will say how I see this current threat. First of all, we'll begin with the rockets and missiles. You can see it here in the pie chart. You can see the numbers. The main problem is the precision project that did not stop with Fatah 110, that are the Iranian ballistic missiles that have a radius of up to 10 meters when they strike. Let me just say, if one of those is shot towards Tel Aviv, that could hit one of your cars that parks there. That's what I mean by 10 meters precision. It's not going to stop there. The vision of Khamenei from years ago is to give all of the proxies precision weapons. That vision is continuing to become stronger. And this precision potential also moved on to short-range missiles, talking about Grad missiles, flak missiles, and what is especially troubling is this issue here. I'm talking about the short range, 65,000 rockets, and missiles. You can guess what that means, the meaning of the trickling down, in inverted commas, of longer range missiles. I'm talking about these missiles, what will happen when they join those 65,000 missiles. The CERSA Institute, I'm connecting with the previous speaker, the Institute 4000. It is very likely that they're carrying out projects intended to manufacture precision missiles. One of the examples is the Iranian project Lebaek that is designed to upgrade Iranian rockets. They are called in Hebrew the Annihilators. That is their name, and they are trying to make them into precision rockets. These are old rockets. They were already used in the Iran-Iraq war, and later they were used by the Iranian ground forces. Sorry, I'm talking about the ground forces of the RGC. And these very same rockets, now they're sort of upgrading them. They're making them more precise. And sure, they're old, but suddenly they become much more attractive because they are precise. You have to understand, these rockets can reach up to 125 kilometers, and you can imagine the rocket arsenal that exists. The story of the precision rockets, and by the way, this is the process. This is how they make a rocket precise. It is not a complex process ultimately. It is manifests in a wide-scale confrontation with Israel. What will Hezbollah do? They will launch a mix of rockets. Most of them will not be precise. There will be barrage after barrage, similar to what we saw now. It will be more than scores. It will be hundreds of rockets. And for example, to the Karayot, just to the south of us here. Now, not all of them will be precise, but it doesn't really need many precision rockets. It is a very dense urban area. For sure, they will manage to hit. So you can see not a lot of is going to be put into making them into precision rockets, but Hezbollah has a lot of these, and concurrently will choose all of the sensitive sites that Israel has here in the Haifa port, and that is could be very lethal. And you have to understand their fitness, Hezbollah's fitness right now, is for the immediate future. There is no real damage that was done to their missile and rocket array. I'm saying this for the first time, so here it's a scoop. You're hearing it for the first time. What we estimate in view of the precision rockets, in addition to the missiles, especially the Fatah 110 array, our new assessment is that as we see it, we are changing our assessment. We used to say several hundred rockets and missiles that are precision weapons. We're changing it to several thousands. Again, I'd like you to think of the pie chart again. We're talking about a magnitude of a large number of projectiles, of which we now assess they have about several thousands that are precision weapons. With regard to tunnels and the underground in general, with regard to shooting from underground, you have to understand that harming underground infrastructure is different when you compare Gaza to this area, because in Gaza, the ground is comprised mainly of sand. In Lebanon, it is rock. And we believe that right now, as we speak, Hezbollah is learning lessons as they understand it from the IDF's fighting in the south and implementing these lessons as we speak in the land of tunnels of Hezbollah. This Hezbollah's land of tunnels in Lebanon, it includes, we believe, several types of tunnels. We'll start with the strategic ones. They are interregional tunnels. They were dug from one area to another, from Abqa to south of Lebanon, from beyond the Litani River to the south of the Litani River. These are the strategic tunnels that are ultimately designed in order to transfer equipment, vehicles, forces. Another purpose of these tunnels is what you see here. This is a kind of an imaging that we performed of the strategic missiles of Hezbollah. We believe that this is where they're located, in the east of Baalbek. It's the same as what you see in Iran. The next panel will talk about that. What they do is they come out of these underground piers and they are launched. When we talk about strategic tunnels, this includes this issue as well. Other tunnels that you can find, that very possibly the IDF will find in Lebanon, are of course the offensive tunnels that were revealed in December 2018. I don't know if there's any more, but any beginning intelligence officer should assume that there are. The same is the tunnels that come close to the border. They don't cross the border, but they come very close to the border, and that's what they're used for. The enemy can hide in them and can surprisingly come out of them. Again, I don't know how many there are, if there are any, but the assumption should be that they do exist. And then there is also the tactical regional tunnels. They are inside the villages, inside the military areas. They're used for their own movement from place to place. And of course, there is the explosive tunnels that are under the communities. And the assumption is that these tunnels are there waiting to be used. Now, who helped the Hezbollah? Obviously, the Iranians and the North Koreans, who were very involved in this construction infrastructure and who helped Hezbollah to get this going. I can tell you that I don't know now. I ask myself whether we are underestimating the tunnels in Lebanon, and I ask myself to what extent do we know about the land of the tunnels in Lebanon? I can't answer the question, but it does trouble me a lot. Now, with regard to the UAVs, 3 years ago we thought they have about 2,000 UAVs. That was based on fairly solid data that we had. And our current estimate is that the UAV arsenal, with an emphasis on suicide UAVs, has increased at least by hundreds. We get examples, demonstrations of this almost on a daily basis in the northern border. Now, dealing with swarms of UAVs from Lebanon is different to what we saw in the Iranian attack in April. First of all, the geography of things. It is not the same time to detect them and to warn about them. And the other parameter is obtaining intelligence. Both of these things will make it very difficult for the IDF to deal with this. I estimate that Hezbollah will be able to get a portrayal of victory if there is a war, as they're actually doing now as well. Now, with regard to anti-tank weapons, I'll say this briefly. We have the Russian Kornet and the Iranian Almas. The Kornet, we know it as 6 kilometers, but now the range is much higher, very problematic. And the Iranian Almas, it is based on the Israeli Gil. It's a 16-kilometer weapon that you just fire and forget. It comes in a high trajectory from above, and it is very difficult to find a solution for this. Beyond that, we have the upgraded Russian RPG. The Iranians added something to that. And this addition of the Iranians allows to penetrate armor and perform a thermobaric process of fire, and that causes a lot of damage to maneuvering forces. We have seen, and we also issued documents about this, that the Iranians sent these weapons to Gaza and to Hezbollah, and they actually covered both of these things that they sent according to relevant camouflage colors. In Gaza, it was yellow, and for Hezbollah, they got the green packages in the color of the greenery. We saw Iranian writing on these things that were sent. Now, their aerial defense array manages to even shoot down some of the UAVs. There is the missile from Iran that managed to shoot down some American UAVs. I think the last one was about a week ago. And you have to remember they also have Russian batteries. They are proper, so to speak. SA-8 is one of them, and that they got from Syria. Now about Radwan. With regard to Radwan, here is what the statement is. We believe that Radwan, if he so wishes and if Hezbollah so decides, will be able to put in action a program of infiltrating Israel. They will use less forces and the area will be smaller. The Radwan forces will probably do this using about several hundreds, 100, 200 operatives. And the area they will go into will be relatively small, and that is unlike the original program where they wanted to use thousands of operatives. Now they have obviously lost the element of surprise, and there's a lot of IDF forces in the area, but we do estimate that if they so decide, they will be able to do this with a smaller number of operatives. The Radwan force fitness was not harmed, all in all. You have to understand that even if the Radwan operatives have distanced themselves from the border, that is not making them less fit and ready for war. They continue to train, also close to the border, we believe. And even if the IDF has harmed 9 senior officers of Radwan and key assets, after all, their fitness of that unit was not harmed. You have to remember, Hezbollah is a, a military force. They're able to handle injuries and fatalities. And Radwan, that is the cherry on top. And in order to harm them, much more has to be done than what is being done now. In other words, it is very difficult to significantly harm Radwan if we continue to conduct ourselves as we have been doing until now. And no doubt that the Radwan force is a tremendous challenge for the IDF still, and also very clear and imminent danger if they decide to come into Israel. Another item that doesn't get talked about much because it is unpleasant, but I will talk about, that's the chemical issue. Now, we believe that we cannot preclude future use by Hezbollah of chemical weapons against Israel. When I talk about chemical weapons, even chlorine is chemical weapons. Of course, it is primitive. It is not sarin. It's not VX or anything else that is more impressive, maybe, but it is chemical warfare. I have to remind you that a tank of this substance, when it blew up in the Aqaba port, a whole chlorine tank exploded. Immediately 12 people died. Chlorine is relatively easy to store, easy to use as ammunition. It is not difficult to store like other chemicals. And ISIS themselves in the civil war in Syria, they used chlorine in their mortar bombs. And therefore, we believe that Hezbollah, if they get the right circumstances, if they have their back to the wall, we believe that they will use this kind of substance against Israel, against the IDF forces that are maneuvering. And in the end, in cells, as I told you in my previous talk, they have the chemical infrastructure for the more complex substances. And I cannot rule out a situation where circumstances that are very difficult for the Shiite axis, that this kind of weapons will not be used against Israel from Syrian territory. I cannot rule out this kind of scenario. In conclusion, Hezbollah will be ready, was ready, and fit against to invade Israel before October 7th, irrespective, regardless of Hamas. They're also ready and fit now. Perhaps they even want to have a war of this kind. The more we hear about ceasefires or arrangements, they will want to have a portrayal of victory, and they will continue and increase their efforts. Maybe what's happening now in Rafah will encourage Hezbollah to do more. We have to understand that absolutely no agreement, no political or diplomatic agreement will prevent Hezbollah to continue to work and operate freely in the entire Lebanon area. You have to remember that. And any agreement of this kind is just buying time. But we have to understand it will always a misrepresentation. And I'm sorry to say, but the only one who will comply with the agreement is Israel. A wide-scale war, a wide-scale confrontation, I believe, is not a question of when. It's not a question of whether. It's a question of when. And my personal estimate is that a war against Hezbollah might break out anytime between now. If there is an agreement this year, then or in the near future, then that will just buy time. But I believe that if we have an agreement this year, then at the latest, I believe that it's going to take 2 years from now. I believe Hezbollah is interested in a war, and there will be a war in Israel by the end of 2026, and that is my personal assessment. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Tal. I'm inviting our president, Sarit Zehavi, again to talk about the civil mechanism of Hezbollah as enabling the human shield tactic.
You can just please help me move the slides or go between the slides. Oh, this is good enough. Thank you. Okay, it's always hard to talk after Tal, be the next speaker after him. But actually, it's been my hobby to talk about the civilian matters. And when I set up Alma Center, I didn't really think that we would be discussing, professionally at least, just as Tal has shown today, you talk about the military issues because my shtick, my hobby is the civilian matter. And when I set up the center, Alma Center, all I cared about was how come? How is it possible? How come? Mothers like me are willing to hide weapons under their children's beds. You saw it in Gaza very clearly. All the explanations about mentality and culture just did not suffice. I completed my degree in Ben Gurion University. I live in the Middle East. It wasn't enough for me. I was looking for more significant explanations. So almost 2 years ago, we issued a very big report about the civilian medium of Hezbollah with an emphasis on its executive council. And I'd like to share with you the highlights of this report, which I think explains this mechanism very well, and it connects very well to what Gershon said. I'm actually taking what Gershon has said, and I'm putting it down to practice, to the down to earth. How do you indoctrinate what Gershon talked about? How is it that the civilian arm of Hezbollah has become a mechanism that enables and serves the military arm? They go hand in hand. They can't be separated. And why is it important that any strategic plan of Israel or the international community will also have to address that, the financing, the long-term damage that Hezbollah's civilian array can cause Israel and elsewhere? What you see here on the slide is actually the main insight, and I'm going to go down into the examples in a minute, but this is the key insight, which is that once you set up a civilian infrastructure, once you create a direct connection with the population, once you support the population and provide it with everything it needs in every aspect of its life, it gives you two things. It allows you to indoctrinate, to actually instill the values of the Islamic Revolution and everything that Gershon talked about in the community, but it also allows you to create dependency so that your population will not be able to imagine anything else. I'll tell you a small story. The groups that used to come to Alma Center 2 years ago, we used to show them a video of a woman wearing a hijab. It was more than 2 years ago, who personally is from the Hezbollah base, and there is a huge economic crisis in Lebanon, and she bravely faces the camera and says, I don't have food for my children. What are you talking about? I don't have fuel. I can't make sandwiches for them. You expect me, and you expect her next sentence to say, the people want change. We want the government to change, just as we heard in Syria. But no, her next sentence was, I would like to call upon my leaders. You're responsible. You have to provide me with it. She can't even imagine replacing them. She is in it so deep. And she expects them to do what they said they would do, but she can't imagine having them replaced. And I think this video really does demonstrate that. So Hezbollah basically does not separate between the civilian and the military. The resistance society ideology leads Hezbollah in everything it does, and it's especially manifest in the human shield tactic. And in fact, every civilian service that Hezbollah gives the inhabitants and the residents allows it to create dependency. So this is the Hezbollah's organizational structure. Look at all the civilian. Look at this cutie here in black. That's the only part that's military. Everything else is civilian. There's the Shura Council, which is up at the top. Under it, there are 5 councils. The Judicial Council, which is a Sharia court, a different, separate court than the court of the state of Lebanon. The Parliamentary Council, which oversees the parliamentary activity of Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is a party, a political party, and there are Hezbollah symbols in the government. There's also the Political Council, which is in charge of political consultation, to the Shura Council, and there is the Executive Council, which really is the core of the connection between Hezbollah and the population, the civilians in Lebanon. And in fact, the Executive Council, well, wait, I'm missing a slide. I didn't notice. So, never mind, we'll skip that. The Executive Council has 9 areas under its responsibility. In our report, we talked about 19 key civilian entities, but I'm sure there are more. For sure, there are more. That are all under this Executive Council, and these areas in which they engage, they cover everything: education, health, sports, economics, including Hezbollah banks, whether it's welfare, society, communication, and even foreign relations outside Lebanon. How do you take the diaspora, the Lebanese diaspora, and bring it into this whole thing? All of these entities do not only allow to cover up the military activity and indoctrinate it, but it also allows them to get the civilians on board and harness them. And the Hashem Safi Adin heads the Executive Council. He's number 2 in Hezbollah. He will be the successor of Nasrallah. I'm saying this very cautiously because he's not too old. And Ali Damush is his deputy, and he is in charge of foreign relations, which is kind of like the foreign ministry of Hezbollah. And we see in our report connections to the military infrastructure of Hezbollah outside Israel. And I'm not sure that if I want to stop for a minute about talking about civilian, but there have been effects from Tal's presentation. But have you heard about this theory of effects? Those who are on YouTube, I'm talking about the fact that we can actually hear blasts now, whatever they are. In the Executive Council, there is also a response, a person, more people who are like military representatives. We don't know them by name, but they are also heads of different regions, the 5 geographic regions: Beirut, Baqa, the southern Lebanon, below the Litani and above the Litani, and also the Lebanon mountains. And I want to give you some examples about what I'm talking about. The Islamic Health Organization, it has this symbol, and if you are from the IDF, look for this symbol. It is the Hezbollah ambulances. There can be a parking area with maybe 40 or more ambulances, and 5 of them will be Red Cross, and 50 of them or 40 of them will be the Islamic Health Organization. And these Islamic Health Organization ambulances will not only help transport casualties, not even just military casualties. They will also transport weapons. They will also transport missiles that are complete and can actually be launched. Another example is Jihad al-Bina. Jihad al-Bina is one of the most important executive arms of Hezbollah. If you know, after the Second Lebanon War and after the Southern Lebanon was destroyed, Jihad al-Bina was very much part of the restoration of civilian infrastructure, and it's in charge of the connection between the civilian infrastructure and the military infrastructure. We also saw it in agricultural aspects. It partakes in building the infrastructure. It helps hide and conceal missiles. It also led the tunnel project that Tal talked about. And on the day after the next war, which we're probably about to witness, it will help Hezbollah recover. Qard Hassan is another example. It's actually the Hezbollah Bank. There's a very nice picture that we issued of UNIFIL soldiers taking money out of Qard al-Hassan ATM machines. Yes, they take Qard al-Hassan ATMs, they draw money out of it, they take money out of the machine, they get cash from Hezbollah-owned banks. Another example we saw is opening Qard al-Hassan branches in a Christian town in Lebanon. And even though there's a financial crisis in Lebanon, they're opening new branches in Amshit, in a village that's Christian in the heart of Lebanon. So these sanctions are probably ineffective. My doctor used to say, no drug is ineffective if you don't take it. No drug is effective, excuse me, if you don't take them. So sanctions are ineffective if you don't enforce them, if you don't impose them. And the same is true for the Iranians, by the way. And we see an increase, a huge increase in Qad al-Hassan's activity. Again, it's another piece of this puzzle. It's another part of the jihadi capital, if you can say that. Between 2020 and 2021, Qad Hassan itself said that it issued loans amounting to $553 million. That's $500 million. Where's the money from? Good question. Let's move on. Let's move on to Hezbollah's sports organizations and facilities, education facilities. Here you see the Imam al-Mahdi Boy Scouts. This is the Iranian Quds Day. They're stamping on Israeli flags. We have a collection of such images. We see them every year. We see the Khomeini on their uniform, and the indoctrination of hatred towards Israel, hatred towards the United States, the big devil, the small devil. It's all part of every educational activity. Another example, do you remember that Netanyahu a few years ago exposed a few Hezbollah sites in Beirut? We discovered 30. One of the sites that Netanyahu talked about was on a soccer field, a soccer pitch. And they immediately brought all the photographers, Hezbollah, to show that it's nothing but a football pitch. Not a single journalist asked the most basic question. Whose club is this? Whose football club is this? Is it Maccabi? No, it's El Ahid Football Club. It's a Hezbollah football club. And it's their football pitch. So within 24 hours, you can make anything disappear. And these El Mahdi Boy Scouts and the kids going to Hezbollah schools and the people living under this Hezbollah indoctrination very soon join their military activity, the Hezbollah military activity. 90 Hezbollah operatives who were killed in these last few years have been Imam al-Mahdi Boy Scouts. And in fact, these Boy Scouts are part of the international Boy Scouts, and they're not on the list of sanctioned organizations. Did you just hear this boom? There's effects to my presentation. So just to wrap up, this is a nice presentation just to wrap up with. Our summary is education. Education is being harnessed. Look at the messages. This is a report we issued a few years ago. We looked at Hezbollah educational activities between 2012 and 2018. I don't need to read this out to you. Just look at this. There's Shuhada, there's Shia, there's Jihad. This is what they're educating for. So the resistance society, and again, I have to say, it was very hard for me to pick the visuals for this presentation. There's so much to pick from, so much proof and evidence of this. The Hezbollah's resistance society is manifest in another term, which is Taba al-Alma, which is just general drafting, the reserve entity of Hezbollah, if you will. These are relevant to help on the battlefield, and they are subject to the Jihad Council. But again, it's all connected. Under this entity, there are civilians. Part of their activity can be part of the Executive Council, and here's the connection between the different councils. They're volunteers, men, women, doctors, farmers. And the farmer, for example, can use the launcher in his field or to open the tunnel shaft once they get the command to do so. These organizations are professional, organized, deployed. They serve the vast majority, the greater public in Lebanon. They are not Lebanese state organizations. In fact, they compete with them, and in fact, they make them redundant to a certain degree. And that's why Lebanon can't progress and can't advance anywhere. It means that the formal entities become irrelevant and die down, and that's the matter of the civilian mechanism that undermines the sovereignty and stability of Lebanon as a state while strengthening the orientation and loyalty to Hezbollah. And this is an image from a video of children in a Beirut school with flags of Iran, flags of Khamenei. This is the direction they're headed, and that's what we need to take care of. And I'll stop there.
I'm inviting the panelists to the stage to answer questions. Any questions that anybody would like to ask? Please just stand and introduce yourself. If they don't use a microphone, I can't hear them. I'm sorry. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Mr. Kleinfeld. I have a question I'd like to ask Gershon. You talked about the theological matter, about faith. And before I came to Kfar Vradim 20 years ago, I came from Jerusalem, and I remember going into a garage, and the name of the garage was Holy Land, Holy Territory Garage. For them, everything is much stronger in these terms. My parents came to Israel after the Holocaust. It was about building the land, and it was about Zion, and there was the anthem on the radio, and we've lost all of that. Are we going to be able to face, in view of what you said, that here in the Middle East we're surrounded by very strong religious faith, and then now we don't have another country, so if it's not Jerusalem, maybe Berlin will be easier for us. Well, the answer is very simple. Myself, together with Ben Gurion and my grandfather, who made Aliyah to Israel with the Trumpeldor pioneers, that's the people I think of. And when I pray, I take things very seriously. One of the problems of the Jews in the diaspora is that what they say in the prayers, they don't really mean it. Somebody in Brooklyn will say next year in Jerusalem, but they don't really take it seriously. And the idea with Zionism is taking things seriously. I'm looking to show you a picture of what the oath of the Haganah looked like. The Haganah members took an oath, and the oath was to even sacrifice their lives in order to defend the people of Israel, the country, and the redemption of Zion. Everybody talks about redemption then. Now, if you talk about redemption, nobody's going to want to have anything to do with you, like Ofer Winter. Nobody wants to hear those things anymore. But Ben Gurion said, we have to understand that we came here for redemption. That is what the Declaration of Independence says. In the end, it invites the diaspora Jews to come to Israel in order to redeem the Jewish people. I take that extremely seriously. And therefore, as Lilach said earlier, also in the periphery areas, that's where we need pioneers. We must remember the pioneering spirit. It exists, and we need to encourage it. And if we return to Manara and to Metula, it has to be young people who are ready to live a difficult life. We're not Denmark. We can't pretend to not be here. And we need people who can fight that changes that will still come. It is a battle, an ongoing battle, and we have to be prepared for it. Another question for Gershon. With everything that was said about the Hudna, Why do we need to count on the Abraham Accords or a change with Saudi Arabia? Maybe that too is just an agreement that is going to be breached very soon. Well, you know what? I'm an Arab person. Everything is temporary. Uh, Abraham, our forefather, he also understood that. I'm not talking about anything permanent. Look, the Labour Party objected to the Camp David peace agreement by Menachem Begin. All of them objected, but everybody voted for. I can show you what Shimon Peres said then and what Aaron Yadlin said, because they believed that destroying Jewish settlements is forbidden. They would have never done this. But Begin wanted something to be final. Mapai never believed finality. They were Ostjuden. They knew that nothing is final. Every day is a new day. It doesn't matter what we agreed yesterday. And therefore, the agreements of today, I mean, if you look at how the Americans speak, they're talking about two states living side by side in an everlasting peace. I asked them, what is everlasting? And nothing is everlasting. It's like a couple standing in a Jewish wedding. There is a contract between the spouses because they know that everything is temporary, even then. More questions? Dana, nice to meet you. I have a question for you. You gave us the quantitative data. Do you identify some kind of matching between what Hezbollah do and what Hamas do in Gaza, for example, when the ground offensive begins? For example, when we were coming up to a hostage release agreement and now towards Rafah. And all of you, I'd like to know, in conclusion of today, Hassan Nasrallah, is he more Lebanese or more Iranian? In other words, can he decide independently as a Lebanese, or is he just a cover for the Iranians? I'll begin. Let me focus on this. We're talking about the northern border, but that cannot be separated from the southern front. Hezbollah also says that they will join what is happening in the south. Please speak to the microphone. Can't hear you so well. Speak into the microphone. I'll help Dana. I don't think that there is any connection with regard to some sort of military collaboration or coordination. You know, do this now and tomorrow do that because we're doing this today. That doesn't exist. Why? I explained it earlier to somebody in the corridor during the break. You have to understand the Sunni Palestinian is Hamas, and the Shiite Arab person is Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah in the food chain is somewhere up top. As far as they're concerned, the Sunni in the food chain is somewhere below the ground, under this stage. And even if that's only if they're being generous. So no, that is not going to happen. No way that Hezbollah will be dragged by Hamas or coordinate anything with them. And by the way, that's why, in my opinion, Hezbollah is not going to join. I said that earlier to you as well. They were already ready for action as far as they were concerned. They didn't know that Hamas was going to do what they did, and they failed to act because of Hamas, because of the reason that I just described, because of this Arab honor. That is the main reason, in my opinion. So, bottom line, there is no such cooperation. Can I add to that, please? Because you know, you speak Arabic better than I do. You know how Arabs think. Sheikh Al-Qaradawi was invited by Johnson to London Johnson was Prime Minister of the UK, and in 2004, when he invited him, he was mayor of London. Al-Qaradawi, after 9/11, was a persona non grata in the United States because he was thought of as the teacher of bin Laden. And then in a press conference, Johnson and Sheikh Al-Qaradawi were asked, how do you invite this terrorist? And Qaradawi said, I am the representative of the tolerant Islam. So the question is, what is he? Is he lying? I would ask him, what are you more? Are you the representative of the tolerance or of terrorism? And the answer is both, depends on the context. Nasrallah, exactly the same. He's both Lebanese and he's pro-Iranian. That's what his deep faith is. And according to the context, he synchronizes. That's how they live. They don't have to be mathematically coherent. And the most important thing in this regard, when you're asking somebody, what are you, more this or more that, something tremendous happened when during the declaration by Khomeini on Jerusalem Day. Jerusalem is the bridge between Shiites and Sunnis. Jerusalem, according to radical ideas in jihad, is even more important than Mecca. That's why there is ISIS groups that so believe. Jerusalem is now the connection point of the new Islam. I'd like to add this. On the last Jerusalem Day of Iran, that was celebrated in the entire Middle East, their sign said Worldwide Jerusalem Day. Next, I personally think that there was full collaboration and coordination with regard to October 7th. We won't agree with one another. That is only one thing that we don't agree about. That is how wonderful research is. And I think there was an Iranian decision, I don't know about Nasrallah, but the Iranians decided to sacrifice Hamas because of what you said, because what do we care about Hamas? Later we'll see. We'll see where it goes from there. Now, with regard to Hezbollah as an Iranian organization or a Lebanese organization, the problem is that if we now sit here and say that Nasrallah believes he is Lebanese, people listening to us will think that he cares about the future of Lebanon as a thriving country. And soon he's going to be building high-tech companies in Beirut. No, that is not the story. The fact that Nasrallah wakes up in the morning and says, you're both Lebanese and Iranian to his people, I don't think he says that, but let's assume that he does. It doesn't mean that he wants the thriving of the state of Lebanon. No, that is not what it implies. And therefore, bottom line, when I have to describe the connection between Iran and Hezbollah, what I say is that Iran is Google International and Hezbollah is the CEO of North America. And they're almost together in this. It's not that he has 51% of that, he's almost a partner. And they care about what he says and what his needs are and what the inter-Lebanon needs are. But ultimately, it's very clear who the boss is here and who you have to be loyal to first and foremost. And Nasrallah says it very clearly. The loyalty is to the supreme leader. And that's what they want to promote. Someone sitting here, I don't know if he wants me to mention his name, but he taught me that Hezbollah's first flag was the Islamic Revolution in Lebanon, not the Islamic resistance. And that's the goal. And for this goal, no problem for Lebanon to go back to the Stone Age. No problem. That will happen first, and then Hezbollah will become stronger. Just one last thing I want to say, but it's not the end because we saved the best for last. The last panel that we want to begin with now, I recommend that you stay because you'll hear new things. Thank you to our panelists. You're welcome to speak to the panelists later if you have any more questions.